My name's Tiffany Ketterman. I'm 47 years old. I'm the executive director and founder of Health Allies. It's a counseling firm for domestic violence. I'm also a domestic violence survivor. When I was healing from domestic violence, I stumbled upon the term narcissistic abuse. And since then, have really learned a lot about that, and that's really the focus of my practice. Narcissistic abuse, people tend to think of narcissistic personality disorder. They automatically go there, but it's really bigger than that. Much, much bigger. Narcissistic abuse is about the abuse that the survivor has suffered, not about really what the perpetrator has done. So there's a big world of perpetrators. That person could be a narcissist. They could have borderline personality disorder. They could be sociopathic. Actually, research that shows someone with psychotic disorder can inflict narcissistic abuse, and also addicts. It follows a pattern that's very predictable. So when you hear people talk about how they've survived narcissistic abuse or domestic violence, that's the thread. The narcissistic rage is very common, just violent rage. Sexual addiction. Perpetrators have patterns of gaslighting, which is basically trying to convince the victim that she's crazy. A survivor one time she used to can, that was her passion, she was into canning, and so he threw a mason jar at her head and caused her to get a concussion. She got a restraining order, and he started leaving canning jars on her front porch. So that's kind of an example, just very sneaky, insidious. It's just horrific abuse to the victim. Typically it's intergenerational, meaning that usually there's a parent or a grandparent or even further back that either have mental illness, have abuse or addiction issues, and they're passing it down to their children and so on for generations. So that's part of it. And then the other part is the kind of the phases of the relationship. And there's the idealization phase, which is what everybody talks about, where they're so wonderful and everything is so perfect and you've met your soulmate and they swept you off your feet. Then once you get sucked in, they start to devalue you. You're not good enough. If you were just this much prettier, if you weren't so demanding, all of those sorts of things. It starts a cycle, and then the abuse will hit that bonds the victim to the abuser, and they do this circle for a while until finally the victim gets to the point of having panic attacks, being exhausted, not sleeping, not functioning anymore because this cycle has gone on so long that it's just really worn her down or him down. And she's of use no more to the partner because she's not functional. And so he throws her away and gets another one. Very, very common for them to be in the public eye. Teachers and pastors, musicians, doctors, all walks of life that are very charismatic. And they're committing abuse behind closed doors, and they're doing it very covertly sometimes so that people can't see it happening, and only the victims know. That becomes another area of victimization, is that the abusers are usually very well liked and very charismatic, and people can't imagine what's going on behind closed doors. And so they go to the victim who's exhausted and trying to speak out for the first time, and people don't believe them. Oh, he's so nice, he's so kind, he's a pillar in the community. One of the things that makes it really hard for victims to heal is continuing to be victimized after they leave. And the way that happens so frequently is when the legal system sees them completely depleted, exhausted, having panic attacks, having physical problems, being unable to work. Then the legal system says, hey, we've got one functional member. Here it is, the abuser, who's fully functional and is having no problems at all. And this, person who's been abused, who's no longer functional temporarily while they're healing. So they get victimized in the legal system. They get victimized from their families. I've had many people that have come in that have said, my family members don't believe me. They don't believe that such horrific things can happen. Being poisoned, being stalked, having your computers stalked, those sorts of things. They sound crazy because we don't see those in normal life, but they really happen. They happen every day. They're made to make the victim look crazy. That's what the abuser intends to have happen, so that people will turn against them. Family members, long-standing friends, they lose their support system altogether. I think women become numb to what they're experiencing and don't realize how dangerous the situation that they're in. Strangulation is actually one of the top lethality indicators for domestic violence. And I cannot tell you how many times I've sat in a room and just asked a group of survivors, how many of you have experienced strangulation? And they all raise their hands, every single one of them. And then we talk about, why did you stay? And all of the excuses that we make. I had it happen to me. I woke up from a dead sleep with hands around my neck. And I laughed because that was the only response I could possibly think of, because it was so crazy. And I stayed after having my husband's hands around my neck. All of those lethality indicators of having guns in the home, threatening to use the guns. If a person threatens to kill you, it's not normal. It's not normal. When you hear those things, that's not love. That's control. And you're not staying for love anymore. You're staying for other reasons. And starting to figure out for yourself what those reasons are is really important. Learning to listen to that voice about whether I should confront him, whether I should just get out without confronting. I will say that confronting isn't going to change things. A lot of times people think, I've found the answer. I found this is narcissism, and if I just tell him that he's got narcissistic personality disorder, then he'll want to change. And that's absolutely not the reality. Usually the abuse is a personality disorder or a addiction or something where that person isn't really, they're not suffering the way we suffer. The person that's suffering from the abuse is the victim. The abuser isn't suffering. So he's got no motivation to change. We walk into a room and we think, does that person like me? What do they think about me? What am I good enough for them? And that's an unhealthy way to live. We can't live that way. So a lot of the healing is around being able to walk into a room one day and say, are these people healthy for me? Do they make me happy? How do I feel around this person? That's when I know a survivor is healing, when they're really getting there. When they can do that, then we know.